live. Welcome, y'all, to the Barracks Live, that non-Euclidean network for a multipolar world. Y'all, we got a decorated naval officer on this stream, so I'm going to need to see some more salutes in that chat. Show some goddamn respect. Pardon my language, sir.
Appreciate it.
As always, we are happy to be here at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I am your co-host, Teray Nasheed. To my right today, switching it up on my right, is the one, the only, the people's ginger, the Yankee Tanky.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an excited one, very exciting one for y'all today.
Brought to you from the shadowy corners of the dark web. You know him, you love him, our resident schizo-in-chief. It's your friendly neighborhood milkman. How you doing, Milk?
He's on your left, man. He's always on your left.
He's on my, I'm looking at my right.
I'm doing all right. I got the old snowball out of storage, so hopefully sounding a little bit better today. Camera coming soon, but
one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Temu works wonders. Amazon is dead. Temu.com is the future. I don't make the rules.
All my neighbors are getting Temu stuff, so you might be onto something.
I got this microphone from Temu and these headphones.
I haven't seen one from Temu yet, so I'll be on the lookout for that.
It's a miracle what manufacturing can do. We need to bring it back to. We need American Temu, because
no doubt
that was the only problem with shipping on these things. I want to ship them from Ohio. God damn it. And y'all, we have a very special guest for you tonight. Out of the heavens dropped an articulate and fearsome opponent of the deep state. He is someone, if you don't know him now, I promise you, you will. This is Ruckus Media, Hurricane Ruckus. How you doing, Ruckus?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. So for those of you guys that haven't seen me, I got on here about a month ago. I've been on Twitter for a month. And my background is I joined the Navy right out of high school, was commissioned. My first tour was on the USS Constitution, where I learned naval history and then taught the public naval history and how we actually got our start towards naval supremacy. Then I went to a destroyer, did a couple of deployments in the Gulf for counter-piracy operations, working through the Straits of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, Gulf of Aden, those type of places. From there, I got selected for the Seaman to Admiral program, where I was commissioned as a naval surface warfare officer. And my last tour, I was the navigation officer on a destroyer and got out. I've got some stories about, why I got out, the wokeness really infesting the military. It's too much to handle. And then also with the COVID vaccine mandates that came out, I happened to be lucky enough to where my contract expired prior to punitive measures being able to be laid down upon me. So I went ahead and said, hey, it's time to bow out. I got to go. But I spent 15 years in the Navy. I really enjoyed it until I didn't. And now I'm out. I own a business. I'm working and just trying to make a living, man.
Yeah, that was the moment when it started affecting the military. People were getting dishonorably discharged, where I was like,
Yeah.
In a country where these vaccines are definitely safe and effective, and I completely trust the science. Wherever it leads me.
My body, my choice, right?
My body, my choice. I have the right to try any experiment.
He made a post about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely pick your brain a bit about your time in the Navy, because all of us here on the barracks have been reading the trend that has been building up in the country as a whole, but particularly in the military. The military, we firmly believe, is the tip of the spear for pushing that progressivist, liberal, what people call woke agenda.
Yeah. Well, you had General Milley during congressional hearings say, he's like, I want to understand white rage, and I'm white. A lot of it's coming from the top down. You've got great people in the military, but you do have a lot of people that are really pushing those type of ideologies down the throat of the subordinates. And really? They say shit rolls downhill. So
yeah, and so we
You want to start there? I'm really curious. I really want to hear these stories.
Yeah, we gotta push the appetizer to the side. We gotta start with the best part of the meal here.
Straight
That's
to the meat and
juicy.
potatoes. Tell us what happened.
So when I first joined the Navy, it was 2006. Okay. And there were still a lot of like old school military traditions, that people get upset and they get butthurt about what they call hazing. But if you didn't take things too far, there was tradition behind a lot of what we did. And if you talk to people, like, for example, when I went on my first deployment, we went down below the equator to the Seychelles, which is an island chain off the eastern coast of Africa. And that's a big deal for people in the Navy because before you cross the equator, they call you like a slimy pollywog, right? So you're just a disgusting creature who's never been around the world. And, but there's pride that comes with that. And once you cross the equator, there's this big ceremony you go through. And I guess you could qualify it as hazing. Some of it, had gotten out of control in the past where, they were doing things they shouldn't have. But a lot of times, when I went through, we got sprayed with fire hoses. We went through, the starboard and port brakes with the sprinklers on and crawling through garbage and stuff. But we had a great time. We're singing sea shanties and calling for flipper off the bow, and just getting through this process. And it builds camaraderie. It builds unit cohesion. And when you cross the line, you get done, and you get through with your ceremony, you become what's called a shellback, right? And they give you a card and this whole thing. So that's one of the things. It's one of the traditions that people love about the Navy, but they've really watered a lot of that stuff down. And it's become ran more so like a corporation than it is a military. When I first joined, you weren't black or white or yellow or brown. You were blue and gold. That's what it was, right? And so I noticed right around 2016, 2017, that the tide was starting to shift. I know my senior year when I was in college, we had to do a paper on ethics in the military. And I wrote a paper saying that we shouldn't allow transgenders in the military. It is what it is. The fact that I had to write that speaks for itself. So fast forward, we're going through the process, and my last ship, that's when George Floyd happened, right? So George Floyd, he died, and it caused mass chaos all the way around the country. People burning things down, burning cities down. And on
worldwide.
Oh yeah. And so on the required reading list for leadership, they had specific books that, talked about that kind of stuff, the critical race theory. And they're like, oh, we're not teaching it in schools. We're not doing that. Yes, they are. Okay. And both my CO and my XO and then another CO had the book White Fragility sitting on their desk with like sticky notes sticking out of it with notes on it. Right. And so I noticed that and I was like, well, that's kind of weird. It's an interesting book. So I looked it up and kind of saw what they were talking about, and just, again, one of those woke books. So we're sitting on the ship and I'm in my stateroom. Right. That's where the officers sleep and where they stay. And a lot of times where they work out of. And I'm sitting there and my captain goes to the Combat Information Center of the ship. Okay. That's the heart of the ship. That's where they launch the missiles. That's where they're pushing buttons and killing bad guys and doing all that stuff. And he gets on the 1MC. Okay. And I'm going to quote you word for word what he said. He addressed the George Floyd situation. And then he said to half the crew, I know I can't understand the plight of black people over the last 400 years due to my white privilege.
It's reading too much Robin DiAngelo.
And I said, wow, he just alienated half the crew from the other half of the crew. Okay. And the thing about this, and the reason why race and politics has no business in the military, especially in the Navy, right, is you're on a ship and you're out to sea. You're all you got. If something happens on that ship, if there's a fire that breaks out or you're being attacked, you're not calling support. All right. There's no flyover support. If you're doing, single ship operations, let's say you get called out to go do counter piracy and a fire breaks out, you can't call the fire department. You're all you have. Okay. So when you introduce ideology that is designed to split people apart and compartmentalize people into specific groups, you're undermining that unit cohesion, which I think has been the biggest issue in the military that's going on right now. And that's why a lot of people, when the COVID vaccine thing happened, some people took it, a lot of people took it. But some people stood their ground, like, I'm not doing this. And it was a way for them to get out. My wife, she was a naval officer too. She got out as well. She was the only person out of 300 plus people on her ship that didn't take the shot. And we both got out of the military. So, and it was interesting is they would actually make fun of us because when everybody went through the shot process on my ship, there was like 5 of us that didn't take it. So as soon as everybody got vaccinated, they had that rule where you could take your mask off, right? You didn't have to wear masks anymore. That lasted like a week and a half. And the next thing you know, it's like, hey, by the way, the shots don't work. So we got to wear masks again. And everybody's like, what the fuck? I took this shot for no reason. I got to wear this stupid ass mask again. And it's like, what do you expect? What do you expect? So it is what it is. I think that the leadership pushing that kind of stuff down to the lower ranks and intentionally going out of their way to try to compartmentalize people into different racial groups is one of those things that is only detrimental to the Navy and detrimental to the military, period.
Yeah. So here's a question. This is off the top of my head. Just based on that, it's interesting that you say it's from the top down, because we have this running joke here at the barracks that the difference between colonialism out there and fascism in here is 10 years. That the conservative people who could, like in politics, who call themselves conservatives today are just liberals with a 10-year time delay. The things that they were like taboo 10 years ago, they're saying,
Yep.
oh no, it's this is fine. We were always for this, we just needed 10 years.
Yeah.
And with this woke agenda, this individualizing everyone and celebrating every like atomized identity to the point where nothing can be criticized, where it demonizes the majority of the country and the most productive being white men. That's just the demographics of this country. We talk a lot about how that the U.S. military pushes that same like woke agenda on other countries, specifically Iran, in Hong Kong. They were doing this, and they do this. They're doing it in Cuba, everywhere. This universal human rights, which atomizes people and divides them and separates them. And now we're starting to see that come here to the United States.
Yeah.
What are the consequences of that kind of division happening within the military, the thing that holds the state together?
Right.
How bad do those consequences get?
Well, I think the thing that people need to realize is when you see, the woke agenda come into the military, they're literally undoing everything that happens in boot camp for enlisted personnel. The first thing that happens when you go to an enlisted boot camp is you lose your identity. Okay. They break you down. Everyone gets their head shaved. Everybody's wearing the same thing. Everybody has to march the same way. You take away individualism so you can then build unit cohesion, right? Well, if you do that and then you get to the fleet or you get to the sandbox or wherever you're going, and then you start introducing these individualistic ideas, you're undoing what you did when they went to boot camp. All right. So here's the worst case scenario. Okay. I'm on a ship. Okay. This is not a story. This is just the worst case scenario. I'm on a ship and the division has grown so great that people dislike you because of the way you are or what you believe in or how you look. Then there's a fire that breaks out or there's conflict that breaks out. And then you have to question whether or not you can trust an individual to save your life or save the life of somebody else. That causes hesitation. Hesitation can get you killed. When you get in those type of scenarios, you have to be able to emphatically and instinctively know the guy that's sitting next to me has my back or the girl sitting next to me has my back. When you introduce politics that are created to divide people, right? We have this bullshit two-party system that is not a two-party system. It's the illusion of choice so people don't feel cornered and they don't lash out, right? Well, when you divide people into different camps, that causes that unit cohesion to start to break apart or at the very least cause delay in the ability for people to react the way they're supposed to. Now, is it that level now? Probably not, because especially if you've got guys in like SOCOM and stuff like that, when they're going in, they've trained together. They know what the stakes are on a daily basis. they have each other's back no matter what. But when you start going down to, a lower threat level, a lot of people have normalcy bias and they say, oh, that'll never happen. Right. And then you get hesitation. So I don't know. It's a problem all the way around. And when they force, the required reading, you can tell a lot about which way your military is going to go by looking at the CNO's reading list or whoever's at the top, their reading list. Take a look at those books and see what you're reading. Some of it will be traditional leadership style books, but then some of it has to do and mirrors the culture that's going on right now. And I tell you right now, the military doesn't need culture. Okay. The military needs mission oriented people that have a job to do, and it isn't protecting other people's feelings. Okay. It's killing fucking bad guys when they need to be killed. That's what it is.
Yeah. That's well put. You're going to say something? No.
Yeah. I want to speak on hazing a little bit because this is something I've noticed elsewhere also, which is like, I mean, hazing is kind of a silly, like, frat word, but it is sort of like an important element of any sort of like strong organization that people are going to be really committed to.
Right.
Like every military in history has done some form of this, like the Greeks and the Spartans and stuff. They had crazy sort of hazing. And I mean, the ruling class, if you want to join the ruling class, the kind of hazing they do is fucking insane.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they want the hazing to like start when you're 13 on Discord. And like the hazing is when you cut your dick off or cut your tits off.
Jesus. Yeah.
And like, that's why you'll be committed, because you get like sexual pleasure from, well, anyway, we don't need to go into that on YouTube. But,
yeah.
Anyway, it does seem like it's like, I'm kind of curious about Trump's trans military ban and like what effect that had. You might have seen that had, because it does seem like they're like breeding these shock troops of the establishment.
So going straight to the hazing piece, what I would tell you is people grow when they go through pain and when they go through struggle, right? Well, how do you get someone? And I'm not talking about hazing where like that one sorority made a guy drink like 30 liters of vodka and he fucking died, right, of alcohol poisoning. I'm not talking about that kind of stupid shit, but I'm talking about like, hey, this is going to suck and we're all going to go through it. And when you're able to go through it together, it builds morale and it builds unit cohesion, right? So as long as it's within, common sense, I'm all for it. I think I had a blast, man. When I went through my crossing the line ceremony, my shellback ceremony, I had an absolute blast. I'm crawling through. They saved week-old garbage and lined the break, which is like the passageway from the midships area of the ship, the middle of the ship, all the way to the forward part, and that's enclosed, right? And you can walk through it and get from the middle to the front of the ship. They lined plastic, and they put a week's worth of garbage in that thing. They called it the trash chute. The first thing you did at 3 o'clock in the morning was get woken up with a bullhorn. You had to duck walk down the deck and then like crawl through the trash. I thought it was hilarious. I was one of the first ones that got through there, right? And you're hearing people behind you gagging. You're like, what? But for me, I had a blast. Some people that, they've been so mentally like broken down their whole life. And when they don't face challenges throughout their life, when it gets time to go through something hard, they break, right? And this is let's give everyone a trophy generation. They're in life, you need to understand something. There's winners and there's losers, okay? We have a whole generation that doesn't understand that. And that's why you're seeing so much like mental anguish and mental health problems and pain and stuff like that. So it is what it is. Now, the transgender thing. So this was pretty controversial when he put the ban out. Well, initially it was allowed, and then he banned it. And we on the ship, it's not like a combat zone, right? We've got females on the ship, and I spoke to females on the ship, because we had one guy on the ship who was going through that process when it was still allowed. And I had female sailors that worked for me, and they would tell me flat out, it's so uncomfortable. We're down there, we're in the shower stall, you're in tight quarters. You've got a cube is what they call it, where it's 3 racks on each side. You've got maybe 3 feet between the racks. So they've got this dude down there. He's intact, so he's not even had any sort of bottom surgery or anything like that. And he's down there, and he's with all these females as they're showering and coming in and out of the head and coming in and out of their quarters. And the number of times I was told, like, I'm so uncomfortable. Like, this guy's like, he's leering, so it's just, again, it's one of those things. Unit cohesion is a top priority for every commanding officer with his crew. You have to work as a team. And when you implement things that create division and doubt, it's a negative. There is no positive side to it. None. Zero. So, and if anybody discounts that, I really don't give a shit because I was there. So in your humble opinion, having gone through it, was bigotry ever as much of a threat to unit cohesion as this new kind of agenda? Bigotry? Yeah, because like people want to say that. What about bigotry? What about because the military has always been. Listen, you fat, you white man. Okay, bigotry has been a problem a lot more than just making us feel included. Okay, so let me give you an example. I was enlisted, and my rating was called a bosun mate or a BM. All right, and they called us deck apes. Okay, that's anybody on here that knows what I'm talking about, that knows what a bosun mate is. They're called deck apes. Okay, which is great because I'm thick built, not stick built, so I'm kind of like a silverback anyway. All right, but I was in leadership in my division, and there was 5 people that in leadership roles, right? Your chief petty officer, your division officer, a couple of first classes, and maybe you got one hot run in second class or an E5. I was the only white guy out of the entire group. And we worked together just fine. So, are there individual examples? Sure. But, when I was coming up, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like people just look, shut your mouth. If you do have those ideas, keep your fucking mouth shut, or you're going to get punched in the face, right? Because you're an asshole, right? Don't be that way. But I've never ran into people who are just like hateful towards another person because of the way they look in the military, because they take that out of you when you go to boot camp, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing that you are able to put it in such simple terms, because the funny thing is that the 3 of us on this stream who are communists understand it. Communists used to talk like you. Back in the 50s, Amilcar Cabral, like his whole revolution in Cape Verde in Africa, like that's his book, Unity and Struggle. That struggle builds group unity. When he was training up a military from scratch, from a tiny little feudal country like the size of Rhode Island, like when he was trying to tell people that that's where it comes from, or like that. Like even in nature, like when a tree is like struggling to come out of the soil, it's like this is where growth comes from as an individual, and that's where unit cohesion comes from. And
that's why Navy SEALs are some of the most elite. They're one of the most elite fighting forces on the planet, right? Because you talk about BUDS, basic underwater demolition school, and what's the big thing from BUDS? Hell Week, right? Everyone knows Hell Week, okay? And it sucks. All right, these people are they can't sleep. They're not allowed to sleep. They're getting their ass beat for a week straight, but they're doing it together and they're struggling together. And it's a weeding out process. They don't want weak-minded people in their team. They want people that can go through the furnace and come out on the other side. You can't sharpen iron with butter. Okay. It's just not possible. Right. So it's a weeding out process. And then they get a lot of their technical training after BUDS is over. Right. BUDS is to get the people that aren't supposed to be there out of there. And then they go through SQT. So struggle builds teams, that builds, the tip of the spear, man. You got to have it. So
this is the kind of wisdom you can only get from someone who has been through the kind of struggle that Ruckus Media has been through. So make sure to share this stream to someone who needs this kind of life lesson. I think that
we really live in a period right now where like pleasure is like the highest moral good. Yeah. And anything that doesn't cause pleasure must be bad, right? Yeah. It's just all about like seeking pleasure.
Yeah.
Not just bad, but a threat to like your existence. Not just bad is like, yeah, I can avoid it. No, if it takes away my pleasure, it must be
Yeah,
destroyed.
it must be destroyed. So like hazing must be bad because it's not pleasurable. You should just go to a whorehouse or something instead, I guess.
Yeah, hedonistic culture is definitely a downfall of
Absolutely.
society, and you got who was it? Was it Crowley that said, "Do what thou wilt," and that should be the whole of the law?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
That's
so
a
glad you
terrible.
brought it up.
That's a terrible way to live, man.
He was wasn't he also a Satanist?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Big
Apparently,
fan. They called him.
Huh.
I don't want to go Alex Jones on you guys or nothing, but
Oh, go Alex Jones on me. Go Alex Jones on me, Ruckus.
but there's a, and again, people will give me shit about this, but I don't care. There's a rumor that Aleister Crowley is the father of, I think, Barbara Bush. You know what I mean? Yeah, or him and Barbara Bush had some things going on, but I think that the rumor was that Aleister Crowley was the father of Barbara Bush, and it's just, I'm just saying, Illuminati Skull and Bones. I think old Bushy was a part of the Skull and Bones there, so
Oh yeah, both of them, both the Bushes.
Yeah, speaking of which, someone in the comments was asking, Florian Gayer asks, Ruckus, in your experience with people from the Navy and the woke agenda, do you think people in the military are more revolutionary, like in regards to being anti-deep state, than others? And where does rank start to play?
Okay, so what I would say is it depends on the person and how they were raised. I think if this was 20 years ago, the majority of them would be. People that are in the military now know what I'm talking about. And if you've been in the military, 10 plus years, the number of conversations I've had with people is like, man, what's up with this new generation coming in here? Right? Like they don't just follow orders, they ask questions to a point, right? But at the same time, they still fall in line. When like the COVID vaccine stuff came out, I had people tell me like, oh yeah, I'd never take that shot. That ain't happening. But when push comes to shove, they took it. And I'll tell you how they did it. So I started following the COVID thing in January of 2020. Okay. I was watching a program called True News. All right. And a guy named Rick Wiles was talking about how they were at Davos covering, the whole elite over there. And they noticed that the Chinese delegate was super sick. And then all of a sudden, Jared Kushner got word and he hightailed it out of there. He was gone. He got spooked by something. And the next thing you know, they started seeing illness. And, then you've seen the videos of the guys falling over in the streets. And, all of a sudden they started locking people in the houses. And they were welding people in their homes and stuff. Well, I was following True News and they were talking about, hey, if this comes here, it's going to be crazy, lockdown and stuff. So I started telling people this, like, hey, there's this thing over in China called COVID. It could come here. If it does, it's probably going to be bad. And I was told, shut up, you're a conspiracy theorist. That's never going to happen. All right. By April, they were like, hey, there's this thing called COVID and we're going to have to wear masks. And, we got to send half the crew home, because I was on a pre-com at the time. And we got to scrub everything down because this is really bad. And I was like, I fucking told you guys this 3 months ago. Like, what are you talking about? And so then the vaccine came out, or it was getting ready to come out, and they were like adamant, this is just to be sure, this is an experimental vaccine. You're not going to have to take it if you don't want to, but it is recommended, and they were kind of slow rolling the propaganda out. Right. And then
the vaccine is recommended.
Yeah.
Your grandmother would take the vaccine and she would be fine. Just get into the vaccine chamber.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So then they started breaking out paperwork, and you had to write whether or not you were going to take it. Okay. So I was a division officer at the time, and I had my division. And so we all sat down, and I'm doing all the research and bringing in all these articles and the FDA slideshow that shows it's going to cause all these effects, myocarditis and risk of heart attack and stroke and miscarriage and all stuff. Because they released a slideshow, right, a PowerPoint with all these things early on regarding the vaccine. So I put it on the captain's desk. I said, here's why I'm not taking it. And he just kind of was like, you're fucking retarded. Like, get out of here. Because I was like the guy, like the conspiracy guy, because I love to talk shit about, stuff going on in the world. And so my entire division, me being the divo and giving them this information, were like, yeah, fuck that. I'm not taking that. I'm not doing that. So everybody signs the paperwork, turns it in. And I'm standing up there on the bridge, which is where we drive the ship from. That was my space, as the navigator. And my XO came up to me. He goes, "Hey, man, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure. Yeah, go ahead. What's up?" He goes, "I noticed everybody in your division said no to the vaccine." And I said, "Okay, what do you want me to say?" He goes, "Why is that?" I said, "Because they don't feel comfortable taking it. It's not been tested and it's experimental." Like, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, it's not mandatory, but you need to help me out, and you need to let them know that sooner rather than later, this is going to be a case of the haves and the have-nots. And if you want to go home to see your family during Christmas, it's going to be a lot easier to approve your out-of-area leave to go see your family if you're vaccinated." Basically saying, like, if you're not vaccinated, you couldn't leave a 50-mile radius from where you were stationed, right? So I looked at him, I said, "So let me get this straight. We have an experimental shot that's not mandatory, that isn't legally required for a member to take it, but you're going to impose certain restrictions on whether or not you take it, and therefore take away the choice and make it mandatory. Is that what you're saying?" He goes, No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that. I was like,
It says here in your file, Mr. Ruckus Media, that you like Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
If you ever want to see your family during the Christmas again, you will take the vaccine.
Yeah. And so I will tell you, a big reason why many people took the vaccine was because before it was made mandatory, they were pressured and they were told, if you want your out of area leave approved, you will take the shot or you will be locked down. And many people, out of convenience for travel, took the shot.
And that no man might buy or sell, that he that has the mark.
Yep.
We got to get on Rumble, y'all. We got to
Yeah,
get
just
on
to remind the YouTube algorithm gods, we are only interviewing this gentleman. He's just telling us. We just want to say that, the vaccine, it's safe, it's effective, it's efficient. I take vaccines every day, I just go in the back room and, I just shoot them up, It's just like heroin. It's fun.
I will say that none of my opinions are that of the U.S. Navy or United States military. I'm acting on my own behalf and making statements on my own behalf. I will not make a statement based on the effectiveness of the vaccine. However, I will say the stories that happened. So take that as you will.
Yeah, we thank you for coming on. I do want to, because y'all, if you haven't seen Ruckus Media's clips, he's only been on Twitter for a month, but his videos are already so good, especially because he says in 2 minutes what we come here and try to say in an hour especially about BRICS. You posted a video just the other day where you posted about the UAE joining BRICS and how 6 out of 10 of the top oil producing countries in the world are now a part of BRICS.
Yep.
And you hinted that you would share your thoughts on Argentina, Ethiopia, and Iran. Would you care to expand on that here? What insights can we learn from those three that stand out to you from those 3 countries?
Well, I would say that Iran is probably the biggest standout just because of their strategic location in the Persian Gulf. They basically wrap all the way around the Straits of Hormuz. I've been through the Straits of Hormuz. I can't even tell you how many times. And the IRGCN is always there. They're always active. A lot of times they'll say that they're going to shut down the Straits of Hormuz. And then what we have to do as the Navy is call FONOPS, which is Freedom of Navigation Operations. And when the Iranians decide they're going to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, we take a carrier strike group and ram it right up their ass and come through and get into the Persian Gulf and dare them to do something, right? But they're always coming in at small boats. And a lot of times they don't have weapons trained on us, or they won't even have a guy on a gun or something like that, just to kind of make it clear that their intention isn't to be hostile, but that they are going to be harassing us. We'll take we'll take measures here and there, but for the most part, Iranians, they're right there at the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz has 40+% of the world's oil that passes through it every single year, right? The UAE, again, is in the top 10 oil producing countries of the world. Iran has a nuclear program that is huge, okay? And Iran is a large country. Speaking of large countries, Argentina is over 1 million square miles. You know, I think they're the size. I read the other day they're the size of Mexico and Texas combined, which you can't really see if you're looking at the globe. It's hard to get that kind of comparison going there, but it's a massive country, you know, and China is making massive investments in both South America, in the Middle East, and in Africa. You talk about Ethiopia, they've got 11% of their export is gold. China and Russia is buying up gold like nobody's business. A lot of people think it's because they intend to do a gold-backed BRICS currency, but that remains to be seen. You know, the last person in the Middle East that tried to do a gold-backed currency was, you know, Libya, right? So that didn't wind up too well for him. They pulled him out in the street, and they wound up, you know, sodomizing him with a knife and killed him in the streets because he wanted to do a gold-backed dinar, and he was only going to trade with that gold-backed dinar. And he was basically throwing the middle finger up to the petrodollar. Okay, well, that's a huge deal. Okay, the Saudi Arabia, they're one of the top oil producers in the world. They're already going back on the petrodollar agreement because the petrodollar pretty much is dead at this point. They're still using it. I'm not saying that they're not going to use the petrodollar, and I'm not saying that they're going to go away from the US dollar. But what I'm saying is the agreement that was put in place was no oil will be traded unless it's done in dollars. Well, Saudis have already accepted various currencies for their oil, and they've traded. So now there's kind of little incentive for countries to hold US dollars in reserve. Here's the thing that you got to understand about that, and this is the big key. A lot of people dismiss BRICS outright. They're like, "Oh, it's not going to go anywhere." You know, they're a bunch of wannabes or whatever. A Russian economist. Yeah, go ahead. What you got?
Deep state spooks like Peter Zion.
Yeah.
Every other video of his is how BRICS is going to fail.
Yeah, and you know, people, again, they have normalcy bias. Normalcy bias does not allow you to see the threats that are coming at you, and therefore prevents you from, you know, getting ready for that threat, right? And it happens, you know, not just in geopolitical terms, but also in environmental terms when you have, you know, a hurricane or a tornado. Sorry, I can't get the Navy out of my head. So, you know, a tornado, and people, they just refuse to get ready for it because they think to themselves, "Oh, it's never going to happen to me. You know, my life has been comfortable for so long. The U.S. can't be dethroned." Well, let me tell you something. The only constant in world power is that it changes hands. We've got thousands of years of history. Empires rise and fall. Every single time you look in a history book, you go to the Persians, you go to the Greeks, you go to the Egyptians, you go to the Romans. They have a great time, and the next thing you know, it starts to go downhill, and eventually they're swept into the dustbin of history. It is very arrogant, or it's very naive to think that the same thing will not happen to the U.S. Okay, and there's why I say that. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, these smaller countries, they can't get away from the dollar because they've got so many loans that the U.S. has given them." Right? I was watching an interview with a guy named Simon Hunt. He's a famed economist. Okay, and he was talking about an interview with a Russian economist who said that all of these countries that hold US dollars in reserve, if they were to default on Western loans, it would not bar them from joining BRICS. Okay, understand what I just said. If you've got a shit ton of greenbacks sitting in your bank because the US has loaned you a ton of money to invest in your infrastructure, and you then build that infrastructure, and now you're in debt to the United States. BRICS is saying you can default on your Western debt, and they will allow you to still join BRICS, which means you would join BRICS with a clean ledger, a clean slate, and leave America holding the bag, right? That is probably the biggest thing that I've seen from the talk of BRICS so far. So,
yeah, I find it fortunate for myself that you have so much experience with the Strait of Hormuz, because maybe you can help me settle a bet.
okay.
Back in 2020, me and a friend of mine, we were doing research about what we thought the spark was going to be for World War III. I had said it was going to be Taiwan because of its super, it's the only place where like the world's microchips, like high-end microchips, get manufactured.
Yep.
She said it was going to be sparked by a conflict over the Strait of Hormuz because of how much oil, just straight up, just how much oil goes through there. which because it looks like I'm winning that bet because I hear Republicans and Democrats and everyone in Congress talking about going to war over Taiwan.
Yeah.
But I don't hear about the Strait of Hormuz. Where do you think do you think that could happen sooner than Taiwan?
No. China went over to the Middle East, and you could type this in, you look at the peace deal that they brokered between Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? Now they're bringing in UAE into BRICS with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Those are three powerhouses in the Middle East. I don't know who's gonna start a mess. The only people that really want to blow up Iran is Israel. You know what I mean? Like they're the only ones that are really pushing hard, to do any sort of offensive attack on Iran. Okay. And this is something interesting to note. And I said this in the video about the UAE is we've got coalition maritime forces in the Persian Gulf that do counter piracy operations, and they do, escorts for certain tankers and things to keep them safe from the Iranians or from, pirates, Well, UAE said, we're not taking part in CMF operations. Okay. So now they're pulling back resources from that coalition group. They're not pulling themselves off of the group, as a whole, but they are pulling back, saying we're not going to take active steps to help you in these maritime force operations. So I don't know who's going to start the issue in the Straits of Hormuz when you start putting all of these Middle Eastern countries and all these Gulf countries in the same block. And then especially with China, a lot of people say that their economy is hurting. They've got ghost cities and that, their commercial real estate markets are in the shitter. That, that's Evergrande and those type of things. But they're making inroads because they have that Belt and Road Initiative, and they're trying to make peace deals with these Gulf countries so that they can trade, and get the valuables out of those countries. And I don't think that they're going to start a war in the Straits of Hormuz. I think if anything, I think you're right. The chips is a big deal, and especially too, like you look at all the greenheads that are trying to get away from fossil fuels anyway, right? Like you need chips for your electronics. You need chips for your iPhone so you can order your Starbucks via, DoorDash and then scream that capitalism's evil. So I think that the chips thing, it would definitely kick off World War III. But the sleeper, and I've heard this before too, is World War III being kicked off with a nuclear exchange between Pakistan and India. I've heard that as well. So that's an interesting scenario. So
yeah, I hadn't heard that one yet. But yeah, microchips also are necessary for all the rockets that make Raytheon employees very rich.
Yep.
So they are probably not going to want to put their McMansions in jeopardy.
And I think that was a big part because Barack Obama, when he was president, he said that they were going to start pivoting to the Pacific theater. And I think a big portion of that pivot is because of, microchips and computer technology, those type of things. So
speaking
it's
of
almost
pivoting,
like, okay, I was just going to say real quick, it's almost like it would be a good idea to start putting computer chip manufacturing in the United States.
You would think, right?
But with that being said, to pivot,
you ruined Teray's perfect segue.
I know it's so terrible. I'm such a bad person for that.
It was flawless.
Speaking of pivot,
so another question that we wanted to ask you today, and it's really changing, it's really pivoting, if you will. I wanted to ask you, what was the case for the deep state using the 14th Amendment against Trump?
So,
and then if you could give us some background on how this, because I mean CNN and all these media, there's 24-hour news coverage about this indictment. But if you give people some background as to
most definitely.
So they're not indicting him on insurrection yet. They haven't dropped an indictment for insurrection specifically. They're talking about election interference. And they had the racketeering and the RICO case in Georgia saying that, he conspired with, I think they had 19 people as a whole saying that they were working actively to overthrow the 2020 election. Some of those were his lawyers providing legal counsel, which is kind of a concerning thing, that they're going to throw the lawyers in jail too. But people understand that there's a constitutional process that he was following. Richard Nixon, he accepted an alternate slate of electors, and I believe it was from Hawaii, and that was not the electors that were originally sent. That was an alternate slate of electors in the 60s. And he said, hey, I'm going to recognize the alternate slate of electors over the ones that you certified and sent to me. So there was a case for that. Now, what they're trying to do is lump in the January 6th riot and then lay that at the feet of Donald Trump, saying that, he orchestrated and he masterminded the entire thing, right? And they'll say he never called for peace, even though he tweeted like, hey, remain peaceful, Like there are things that he's done, and it's the same people that say he's never denounced white supremacy, but you can look online and find like a dozen times where he's like, I denounce them. What do you want me to do? You want me to denounce white supremacy? I denounce white supremacy. It's terrible. It's totally fine. It's awful, right? And so I've seen, and I've made mention of an ABC News article, and basically there were even conservative legal scholars who I'm sure are part of the anti-Trump GOP section of the right wing, and they were saying that you don't even need a conviction of insurrection to apply the 14th Amendment. They were saying that the state election officials and the state secretary only need believe that he took part in insurrection, and then you can then take him off the ballot in Article 14, Section 3, which is committing insurrection against the United States government or giving aid or comfort to the enemies of the United States. So they're basically building this crescendo up, right? They rolled out indictments. They kind of started out like one was like a misdemeanor, and then they built up the secret documents case, and then they kept going, and now they've got the RICO case in Georgia. And originally, I thought they were going to actually try to indict him for insurrection, but then seeing the articles were saying that, hey, you don't even need an indictment or conviction. You just believe that he did the insurrection thing. That's what they're going to go with to try to get him off the ballot. Whether or not that works remains to be seen. I know New Hampshire, I think it was Bryant Messner, was in New Hampshire trying to get that going, but I guess the governor has since said he wouldn't support it. I saw that today. So they're hitting some roadblocks on that piece, but you still got lawsuits in Florida. You got California, who is probably going to go down that road. So it's kind of crazy times we're living in right now, to be honest with you. And part of me thinks, are you doing this because you actually want him off the ballot, or are you doing this to stoke as much chaos and anger and vitriol in the country to where the political divide is so deep and so harsh that you can then say, hey, if we have an election, it's a danger to our democracy because, the violence is going to be so great. So we're going to go ahead and just, we'll put a lid on it and we'll delay it for a little bit. I don't know. And then I saw on Newsmax, Joe Biden apparently has some audio tape that they're going to release in the next 6 weeks that is irrefutable evidence that he's done wrongdoing, and he's going to have to drop out of the race, which is probably going to clear the way for Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama to jump in, but that remains to be seen. So I don't know if they're doing it on purpose to get him off the ballot actually, or if they're just trying to cause chaos because they seem to be agents of chaos and they love the fact that people hate each other.
I think it's like they like making an example of him. Like, this is what happens if you try and fuck with us.
Well, that's like the guy that was Black Voices for Trump. You know what I mean? And he was the only one. He's the only black guy out of 19 people, and he was the one they remanded to custody, right? And I think he just got out on bond today, right? But so what does that look like? You know what that is? That's a message, right? When the mugshot came out, how many videos have you seen on Twitter, right, where you've got people from the black community that are like, Trump is our guy. We're going with Trump. We're riding with Trump, right? And it's really starting to turn the tide. The Fox News poll came out and said now that mugshot's come out, Trump has 20% support among black Americans, where it was, sub 10%. Okay. So it's just kind of crazy, man. It's just wild.
Well,
so
because it's not really Trump that they're afraid of. It's Trump's base. It's Trump supporters. That's what the January 6th PSYOP was really about. It wasn't about demonizing Trump, even though they're using it for that. It was really about demonizing Trump supporters.
Well, you've got people from January 6th that are still in jail that committed misdemeanors and still haven't had court dates. They've been locked up for 2+ years.
Yep.
You couldn't even get a year. You couldn't even get a year-long conviction. These guys have been locked up for 2 years with no due process. It's crazy. And they locked that guy up in Atlanta and remanded him to custody, the Black voice for Trump, to tell the black voters, hey, if you step off the Democrat thought plantation, Biden said it. If you don't know whether you're for me or for Trump, you ain't black. So that's the reason he was remanded to custody, because apparently they don't look at him as being a black man. So they want to make an example and say, look, if you step out of line, you step off the Democrat thought plantation, you're getting no quarter, and we're not gonna help you out.
Yeah,
So.
Agents of Chaos is probably the most succinct way of putting it. Just as the positivist approach to all of their policy goals is not to build anything; it's to destroy something and end the chaos. Because you when you mentioned microchips being a big part of this green fascism, this enforcing the degrowth, this depopulation agenda. In the name of the planet, in the name of Mother Gaia, that's the real goal, isn't it? Not microchips is the material that you need to sort of have a monopoly, how oil was for the petrodollar monopoly. Yep. Microchips is for a lot of different technological monopolies, but to secure that monopoly of green technology and digital surveillance and digital just attention economy, all that stuff, to maintain that monopoly, you need to impose as much chaos on people as possible.
Well, also follow the money, right? So what was Trump known for? Energy independence. Drill, baby, drill, right? That's what they were going with. Gas prices were down. Gas prices were as low as they were when I started driving. You know what I mean? And now they've since doubled. And because the first day Biden got into office, he signed the executive order to shut down a whole bunch of drills, a whole bunch of pipelines, things like that, and shut the spigot off for energy independence. And then we started importing oil again, and we got close to the midterms, and he wiped out the strategic oil reserves that Trump filled up at the lowest prices we've seen. And now he's talking about refilling it now that the prices are, skyrocketed. So, but where's the money going? We're talking about this green energy. We're shutting down the fossil fuels. Okay. It's going to green energy. It's going to solar panels. It's going to wind farms. Well, who's manufacturing the solar panels and the wind farms? China, right? Who's in discussion with taking over Taiwan to get their hands on the microchips? China. Okay. Who's buying huge swaths of land in America next to military bases? China. So follow the money, and you'll figure out, what the intent will be. So it's fifth generational warfare is what it is. China has 50-year plans, 100-year plans. Yuri Bezmenov has a YouTube video. It's an older video from the 80s. He talks about the demoralization, the destabilization of countries. And if you watch that video, everything that he lays out, we're going in step for step down the line to destabilize America. And basically China is using Sun Tzu's art of war, and they're trying to take America down without firing a single shot. And economically right now, with their investments, and apparently there's north of $50 million that the Biden family has received from China. Follow the money, man.
Absolutely.
One of the things,
and say that Canada owns way more land than China does, and that's something nobody ever talks about, but I think if it's more land, it's more concerning, isn't it?
Well, not necessarily, because it depends on where the land is. The land that China's buying, like I said, is strategically located at military bases, right? So you're gathering intel on military infrastructure. And also, we're letting Chinese military balloons fly across the country, and they're gathering SIGINT, or signals intelligence, right? They're gathering communications coming out of these bases. They're soaking up all the frequencies, and they're getting a layout of military infrastructure throughout the country. So I personally think that no foreign country should own land in the United States of America.
I agree.
From
I
a national
agree.
security perspective, that's retarded. Like, and Robert Downey Jr. said it best: "Never go full retard, man." So,
Not even just national security. It's just like it's just wrong. Like we're Americans.
Yeah.
That's our land, and you're just
Right.
like it's like a whore country. You're just like
Yeah.
pawning it off.
Well, one of the things I think we should all look at is it's not just countries that own land. In fact, the overwhelming majority of land in the United States is controlled by one company, BlackRock, right? And what do you
Yeah,
see is
that's
BlackRock buying up all these houses,
Mhm.
Taking away the American dream effectively
Absolutely.
from most Americans, right?
Mhm.
So, as much as we can say that, China or Canada or any of these countries shouldn't be buying American land because it's American land, we should have that same standard for, companies like BlackRock, that their only interest is to, they're connected to the degrowth agenda. We talk about, the environmental, these greenheads as you talk about them, right? It's
Mhm.
the same thing in the regards of BlackRock and Vanguard. These companies want to control all of our property. They want us to live in pods and eat bugs.
Yep.
We will have nothing and we'll be happy.
Yep.
Oh, I mean, I don't know about you. I won't be happy
Not me.
about that, but
I never want to miss an opportunity to push the anti-Canada agenda.
Yeah. Well, Justin Trudeau, that guy. First of all, I firmly do believe, like, I know it's a conspiracy theory, but I do believe he's Fidel Castro's son. Have you seen
They
the
look a
side-by-side
lot
pictures?
alike.
Bro,
They look a
it
lot
looks like
alike.
they pulled him out of Fidel Castro's ass, okay? Like the younger pictures of Fidel Castro and Justin Trudeau, are, if you put them side by side and you were on Maury, it would be like, you are the father, okay? Like, give me a break. And
So we
not
gotta
only
get
that,
imagine Justin
yeah.
Trudeau and Fidel on Maury. That
Oh
would be
my
a
God.
hell of an
Well,
episode.
Yeah, man.
It's
I mean,
funny
this is
because Cuba only since 2014, when Barack Obama introduced Facebook onto the island, like they have a lot, like people are making fun of Cuba a lot now. It's just like, oh, they're introducing gay marriage, and then it's like, oh, it's
China's building secret military bases on Cuba. Did you know that?
But yeah, we had heard about that.
Yeah.
And just, I don't. I attribute a lot more malice from the American government introducing Facebook onto Cuba than the Chinese having military bases in Cuba. If anything, because I've seen what Facebook can do in terms of starting like genocides and race wars,
Yeah.
like they did in Myanmar.
Yeah.
And just trying to start that color revolution in Cuba,
Yep.
which, if you turn Cuba, if you use like Facebook to turn Cuba into the next Haiti, that would cause a lot more instability to the Caribbean and to the region than, the Chinese, who I don't see them causing failed states anywhere else in the world.
Well, I wouldn't say that their goal would be to cause a failed state, but from a national security perspective, having a Chinese base that we're not really sure what the capabilities of what they would install would be. Having them that close to America is pretty dangerous. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where, so that's a big deal. But I definitely don't think that they're actively trying to destabilize Cuba, because what would be the point?
The contradiction is that China's on the other side of the world, and that the Monroe Doctrine, which was to keep Europe out of this hemisphere, is just like we're no longer interested in in leading this hemisphere. We're just about causing chaos at the Mexican border, turning Haiti into a war zone, and it's the same like everywhere. And it's we shouldn't be surprised when other countries like Cuba, like Argentina and Chile wants to do business with the Chinese, when they're just like, hey, literally anyone, please help us, lead us with development. And it's a fault of our own leadership that it's like, hey, why are we letting the Chinese when we
hubris.
we could clearly be the leaders in this hemisphere of
absolutely,
of
and we should be
development. Yeah,
we definitely should be. There's no reason why we can't be or why we shouldn't be. And going back to the Facebook thing, if you want to know how great Facebook is, look at the people that run it and how they don't allow their children to use it. I mean, you can look up documentaries of people that worked for Facebook, designed Facebook, engineered all of these social media platforms, and they'll get asked like, hey, do you let your kids have screen time? And they're like, no, I don't let my kids have screen time. I don't let them on these things, but yet they proliferate it, as far and as wide as they can, because it does have psychological warfare availability to it. Like
or just literal warfare, like Myanmar, like the Rohingya genocide. People like think it just happened spontaneously, but it started from Facebook. Like the president of Myanmar, who was appointed by Barack Obama, just like enthroned by Barack Obama, started that race war through Facebook. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of talk a little bit more about Donald Trump, but still kind of related in this context, right?
Thank you.
So, you have Donald Trump kind of being the only man in the race right now that's saying that we need to end a war with Ukraine, right? Or a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine, right?
Yep.
He wants there to be peace. You have another faker, Vivek, right? Which kind of goes into the question I want to kind of pose to you here, right?
Okay.
Here at the Barracks, we've talked about Trump's opponents in the GOP race, Vivek and Ron DeSantis, and specifically how they're both shills for the donor class. We're trying to split Donald Trump's base.
Right.
What are your thoughts about these candidates, and do you think that Donald Trump would be the person that actually would end this proxy war with Russia, or do you think that Vivek and DeSantis actually would try to do the same thing?
Well, so going back to the debate, and I'll kind of start with the people that were at the debate. Asa Hutchinson. I said that he looked like a heroin addicted Ross Perot up there, but he actually brought up the 14th Amendment to get rid of Trump and said he was disqualified. So he's in the camp, the anti-Trump camp forever. Krispy Kreme Christie, he's the guy is like, he's got hugging Obama. He's an insufferable suck up. The guy's ridiculous. Why he's basically on a revenge tour to try to degrade and denigrate Trump as much as humanly possible, knowing that there's no way anyone is going to vote for him. Like, it's not going to happen. If you think Joe Biden is feeble and can't walk up a flight of stairs, you're going to have Chris Christie carry an oxygen tank to get up the stairs to Air Force One. Okay, give me a fucking break. All right. You got Tim Scott. He says a lot of good stuff, but he's kind of weak. He's whatever. Nikki Haley is a war hawk, right? She's channeling Dick Cheney more than his own daughter. Okay. And
when you see women in politics in any country, when you see women in politics, that the donor class is trying to start a war.
Yeah.
Estonia, straight up.
New Zealand.
Well, look at the history of Victoria Nuland. Everywhere she goes, a coup happens and an overthrow of the government is there, and then they install a puppet government to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Did you see the clip of that Polish presidential candidate just screaming about Russia?
No.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
No, I haven't seen it.
Wait, I'm gonna try and pull this up.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, drop the clip in the private chat and I'll pull it up. But yeah, Victoria Nuland, for the audience who doesn't know, like her most high profile visits in the past 12, maybe 24 months is like Niger, Taiwan. Last November she went to Ecuador, and now magically their election, like, it has like 3 different assassinations happening like a week before their election happened.
Look at the civil unrest in Niger right now.
Yeah.
Just absolute mayhem, and then let's see who else was on the stage. That's how memorable they are. That Doug Burgum guy, he just had he just was doe-eyed. He didn't know what was going on. He said that we should use harpoons to fight the Chinese Navy. Harpoons, that's laughable, dude. Harpoons are an older system. Okay, they've got limited capability. You're not going to fight a growing Chinese threat on a surface ship with harpoons. That's ridiculous. So I don't know where the hell he's getting his. I don't know where he's getting his foreign policy directives from, or his international defense memorandums or whatever. I don't know where he's getting his information, but they need to put it back in the closet. And
Next, he's going to
that way.
suggest flaming arrows coming from
Yeah.
archers.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Greek
exactly.
fire.
Right. Like, oh, bring out the trebuchets, you know.
He also kept saying state and having to correct himself
Yeah.
to say country. He's really out of his element. I
I
don't know where
came
that
from a
came
town of 300 people. Like, okay,
If
cool,
somebody
dude.
heard that, try that in a small town song and was like, "Oh, that's it.
Yeah,
we get
that's
a
what we're
small
running
town
on.
guy."
We're running on that small town guy.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And it's the same. It's the same school of thought of like all the people who are telling Zelensky what to do, which is to throw tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young men into the meat grinder.
It is a meat grinder. Absolutely, yes.
Not to
you have a whole generation getting wiped out.
Yeah, gone. And you can see that starting to pop up now in both sides, like in both sides in the American Uniparty.
Yeah.
There's absolutely. Just you fight the advanced Chinese Navy with harpoons because we don't want you to come back.
Right. Well, we had the LCS class ships, the littoral combat ships. You got two different kinds, the Independence and the Freedom, and they sent like billions and billions of dollars into this program, right? And the whole goal was to take these ships and like swarm the Chinese, let them shoot all their munitions, and then clean up the rest with your traditional naval forces. Well, these ships are supposed to last 25 years. They're already decomming all of the Freedom class ships, like within 5 years. You didn't even get 5 years, and they weren't even operational for any sort of military, cohesion, surface threats, and they weren't even being used. So it's the amount of money that was wasted on that program. It's a running joke in the surface fleet and the surface community. Just how bad that program was run, and the fact that they can't get it off the ground. And I'll give you a taste of the propaganda. So I had a buddy that was on one of those ships, and they were in Milwaukee doing their sea trials, their contractor sea trials, which is where like you're ready to go out to sea for the first time. They're like lighting stuff off and checking to see if all your internal systems work, your engineering and things like that. And their engineering plant failed, like in dramatic fashion. Okay. And they had to get towed back into port. Well, a week later, and he called me. He's like, "Hey man, yes, it sucked. Like it was awful. This is what happened. Boom, boom, boom." A week later, I'm sitting in the dental office, and the base that I was on had a newspaper. And I opened it up, and it showed his ship, and it was like LCS class ship X completed contractor sea trials. I'm like, "No, you didn't. You got towed back into port, you fucking liars." Like, so it's propaganda, man, and it's crazy.
Your branch specifically has some of the hard, biggest recruitment problems in the military, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of that has to do with the vaccine. I had a friend that was a recruiter for enlisted sailors, and when they brought the vaccine mandate, their recruitment numbers tanked. I'm talking about went through the basement
because it was so safe and effective. Okay.
Because it was so safe and effective, and but you think about the people. Think about a lot of the people that join the military. Number one, less than 1% of the populace joins the military and serves in the military. Okay, and those that typically do have a reason to join the military. I remember when I first joined, people were coming out of the woodwork. Good old boys that were coming out of the country to go kill bad guys. Okay, because they watched what happened on 9/11, and they were like, "Fucking not here." Not while I'm here. And you had people joining that had values. They were raised on hard work. They were raised on values of principle. And that still remains in a lot of areas. It's the wokeism has expanded. You do have a generation, I think, of lost people who have no direction. And I'm not trying to quote Vivek here. I'll get into him in just a second. But, he does say some things that I do think resonate with what's really going on right now. We have a generation of men who are lost without purpose, right? But there are still pockets, right? The Bible says that God was speaking, and he said, I still have 7,000 that have not bowed the knee to Baal. Okay, you're always going to have a remnant of people that are willing to do what's necessary and stand on principle. And when that mandate came out, those people that do stand on principle that were thinking about joining the military, they took their ball and they went home. They were like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that." And it hurt recruiting bad. The vaccine mandate hurt recruiting real bad. And even though they've lifted the mandate, I still think that there's some hesitation by a lot of people with the fear that they would put it back in place at some point. And then it'd be like, okay, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? So.
Yeah, you said you were gonna talk about Vivek.
Yeah,
our old friend Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, yeah. So Vivek, his background is murky, I guess, is the best way to put it. He's
to say the least, yeah.
To say the least, he stands, on that argument where he was on the World Economic Forum global leader list, and he sued the World Economic Forum to get his name removed off the list. He said, but he also, I guess, had the sponsorship or the what's the thing you get, scholarship program for George Soros to go to college. So his background is kind of weird. You got that video of him questioning Al Sharpton, like, as a, if I'm going to vote for a Democrat, who am I going to vote for? And then all of a sudden 2024 starts looming, and the next thing you know, this guy comes out of nowhere he's also got big pharma in his background. Again, that's a big hurdle for me. But he's saying everything that everyone else is not saying, right? He is on the whole, let's stop the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. Now, whether or not he believes that, or whether or not he could get that done, I don't know. He's talking about bringing China to task, through trade agreements and trying to get them to back off. How much of that he actually believes versus how much of that he's exploiting and trying to endure himself to the Trump base, because he's a young guy. I think he just turned 38, right? So we're going to be seeing him a lot. And I think maybe he's trying to endure himself to the Trump base, seeing that the issues that Trump is going through, to where it winds up happening that if they do take Trump off the ballot, or they take Trump out, as Tucker Carlson alluded to, that he thinks the next stage for the Democrats would be to potentially assassinate Donald Trump, which, God forbid. But let's just say Donald Trump is removed. Vivek Ramaswamy is trying to lay the groundwork and the foundation to be the next guy in line for the Trump base to jump on board, because he sees the passion that Trump supporters have. He sees the awakening that's going on. And he's seeing, like I said, the black vote is 20% to Donald Trump right now in that Fox News poll. Now, you got to question sample sizes, things like that. I get that, right? Polls, what's that thing from the campaigns? Like, polls ain't scientific. It's like, yeah, that is. That's all it is, science and math, right? So, but I think he's trying to set himself up to be the replacement pick for the Trump base, because he knows how strong the Trump base is. So if something was to happen to Donald Trump, he can step in the gap. And he's done that more so than Ron DeSantis, because I think Ron DeSantis, he has had some blunders in his campaign. Who's running your show, dude? Like, I've got a 7-year-old son that can run a better campaign for Ron DeSantis than the guys that he has hired, because it's not hard. It's not difficult to run a campaign and speak and stay on message. Right, like, the guy's kind of all over the place. He's got that weird head movement where it's like a bobblehead, and he does he doesn't come across well. When he's speaking, it doesn't come across as very genuine. It comes across as, hey, I know I've got a very red state and a Republican House and Senate in my state, and so I can just sign legislation that I know that the conservatives of the state are going to pass, and then I get to take the credit for it. Whether or not he would have fought for that had he not had the support of the House and Senate in the state remains to be seen. I'm not very convinced that he would. I think he's one of those guys that would go along to get along, as long as it keeps him where he's at. So I don't find Ron DeSantis to be very genuine.
When I look at Ron DeSantis, I'm always reminded that, Donald Trump is the only reason that man is governor. Right? He came in, he endorsed him last minute, basically, and miraculously Ron DeSantis won the governorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Ron DeSantis went against Donald Trump just kind of really shows genuinely how shady Ron DeSantis really is. Because you wouldn't be in office, dude. Like, no one even know who you are.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think Ron DeSantis' biggest credit that he has taken and the way he set himself apart is the fact that he has such a conservative legislature in his state. Republicans control both sides of the House in the state of Florida, and not by a narrow margin. You know what I mean? And so when the legislature passes extremely conservative bills and they're passing state laws that benefit conservatives in the state, his job is so easy as the governor. All he does is sign it. He just has to sign it. And then he gets to go on camera and take the credit for it. Okay. I guarantee you, if he was in a purple state, that probably his success would not be where it is right now had it not had the deep conservative base in the state of Florida. Okay. But I will tell you this, Trump has his issues too. Okay. And the biggest issue I have with Trump is his support and his continued support for the vaccine. Okay.
Which are safe and effective.
Very safe and effective.
Right. And I'm not saying anything negative about the vaccine. I'm saying that his support for the vaccine, and when you look at the Trump base and you look at what they believe and what they think, for him to continue to be an ardent supporter of vaccines, at one point he said that he wanted it called the Trump zine. Okay. He wanted to name it after himself. And I think, you know, you got to love the guy for how brash he is. You got to love his brazenness and his ability to just like take a sledgehammer to the establishment, you know, call Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig, you know, but his ego blinds him sometimes, and his inability to effectively hire people into his cabinet and then not make the hard decision to get rid of people like an Anthony Fauci, for that guy to continue every single day to go on the news and say the stuff he's saying and to just not fire that little elf and kick him off the road. That really bothers me. Now, I know that a lot of people are saying he's out for vengeance and he's going to fire everybody and do all this, that, and the other. He's got to make smart decisions in who he hires and who he puts in his cabinet. The dude hired snakes his first administration, and he's famous for that speech, the snake speech, right? Talking about, oh, you know, you take me home and I slithered up and I bit you and you asked me why, and I told you I was a snake from the get-go. Well, for somebody that makes that speech so often, he hired a ton of snakes and put a ton of snakes in his administration. So if he's going to be successful, he's going to have to be on the ball with who he hires and who he brings in. Okay. And then he's got to drop this vaccine crap. Like the support of the vaccine. That's my biggest issue with Trump, is the fact that he's still touting this thing as the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the fact that he takes credit for warp speed. And I'll be honest with you, if I was a Democrat, especially with all the data coming out that the majority of people that are dying of COVID are vaccinated, that's a statistical fact, YouTube. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not saying that the vaccine doesn't work. I'm just telling you the fact, the statistics. Okay. If I was a Democrat, I would say we were pressured to put this vaccine out because Donald Trump forced it through approvals via warp speed, and everything that you're seeing and all the issues and the damage and the injuries is due to Donald Trump. If I was a Democrat, that's what I would do. The problem is they're all in it together. And I think that they like to see the fact that, you know, people are taking these shots and they're getting money just like anybody else. So, you know,
well, I have a question for you on that line. What do you think about RFK Jr.?
I was going to ask that question.
So I don't understand why he's running for president. I really don't. As a Democrat, especially. I think he would get more traction if he was running the Republican Party. I understand his family history. I understand the Kennedy name is, you know, it coincides with the Democrat Party, but it's not the same Democrat Party, right? The liberals, the actual liberals who used to be for freedom of speech, who used to be for freedom of choice and all these things, they've become a tyrannical group at the top, right? So he's kind of antithetical to the leadership of the Democrat Party right now. And I don't understand why he's running with no true path to get the nomination. Okay. I'm not, and to be honest with you, he said some stuff about, you know, the Second Amendment that I strongly disagree with. And then there was that story where he had a party at his house and his wife, like he didn't know it, but I guess his wife told people they should be vaccinated before they show up. And his statement was, well, I guess I'm not the boss of my own house, sometimes. So I don't, he's done a lot of good work when it comes to vaccinations, and bringing to light, environmental issues, and big pharma issues. He's done a lot of good work there, but the problem is everybody's got problems, man. I don't know. I don't trust him. I'll be honest with you. Like he says a lot of good things, but at the end of the day, I don't like him.
Yeah, I would say I'm of two minds. And one of them is what you were just pointing out about how there's this disconnect between Trump and his base with regards to vaccines. Maybe some other people noticed that, and that's sort of why RFK Jr. exists and is running right now.
Right.
And then my more naive, I guess, mind is thinking like maybe he is trying to be like the next JFK, because JFK sort of pandered to the mob, because the mob was really powerful when JFK ran, and he was hanging out a lot with Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
I think he even sat down at dinner with Sam Giancarlo. But then when he got elected, he cut them out, and he appointed his brother as attorney general, and he started going after them, and then eventually they killed him.
Yeah, I mean, JFK also wanted to dismantle the CIA. Like,
the CIA and the mob,
which is like
together
the most important. That's like the most important thing you could do as a president of the United States is
the
dismantle
CIA
the biggest.
Pretty much is a mob.
Yeah.
I mean, it's organized crime. That's
a lot of people point to the assassination of JFK as the turning point and the beginning of the downward spiral of American society.
The century of humiliation.
It was a coup.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was the coup that they won, and they're still in power. I mean, H.W. Bush was one of the guys who organized it. Yeah. And he became president, his son became president.
Well, think about how crazy it is that it's a commonly accepted fact that the CIA killed a sitting president and they're still allowed to exist. Think of the cognitive dissonance that it takes to sit there and allow the CIA to exist, knowing and accepting that they've killed a sitting U.S. president.
Well, but like they won't accept that on like CNN. It's sort of like an emperor's no clothes thing. Like we all know it, but you can't. If you actually went to one of these like DC dinner parties or child sacrifices or whatever they do, and you said, "Oh yeah, the CIA killed JFK," they'd be like, "Oh, sir, I beg your pardon." Like monocles would pop out, Like,
I beg to differ, sir.
You have spoiled my adrenochrome.
That's why they won't declassify the documents, because they can't actually let it be.
Well, I think didn't Trump say he was going to declassify the documents? That was one of the statements he just recently made. He was going to declassify everything. And I'll tell you, when you start making threats like that, like they've already done it once, don't put it past them to do it again. Okay, especially if he's not sitting as U.S. president, and if they feel like they're going to be threatened and they actually feel like the intelligence apparatus is going to be having a bulldozer run through the living room, don't put it past them to do it again, especially with the advancements in technology. The CIA had heart attack guns, and this is a real thing. They had the ability to have a heart attack gun. They could point it at you and cause the electrical signals in your heart to malfunction. You die. Okay. This is a real thing. Okay.
You can find footage from the church committee of Congress passing this gun and like oohing and awing at it, like it's like these. And so
and that was years ago. We don't even know what kind of technology they have, and what they could utilize to take somebody out and make it look like an accident. Especially he's up in years now. He's in his late 70s. It would not be unfeasible for a man, especially under the amount of stress that he's under, for then all of a sudden you see on CNN or you see on MSNBC, they're trying to hide the smirk on their face as they report that he's had a heart attack and he's no longer with us. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, as soon as the camera goes off, they'll be in the green room drinking champagne because they don't give a shit. So
And
adrenochrome, as Aaron said.
Yeah.
That really cracked me up.
yeah,
that was and that's ultimately why we don't trust people like RFK, no matter how much
We'd
they
see
might say
protests and
things we
riots
agree
in
with.
the street.
Say again, Yankee. You cut out for
You
a
cut
second.
out. You cut out.
Sorry about that. Do you feel like if they were to, use the heart attack gun or whatever, right, on Trump, do you think that we would see a situation where MAGA would be, out on the streets protesting, rioting, what have you? Or do you think that, MAGA folks would just kind of roll over and let it happen?
I think it's determined upon how overt the process would be to remove him. Okay, if it's something to where like he gets reported he's had a heart attack, again, it's not unrealistic for a man under the kind of stress that he's under right now at his age, the traveling that he does, the speaking that he does, for someone up in age to have a heart attack and go down that way. If that was the case, people, I think the Trump base would be shocked. They would be sad. You would see a ton of conspiracy theories online. I promise you, like, even if everything was on the up and up, right? Let's just say that it naturally occurred. Okay. Or it looks natural. I think a lot of people would be sad. I think some people would kind of take the disgusting route and celebrate it, but I think the base would just kind of say, yeah, that sucks. It's time to move on. And unfortunately, Vivek is kind of waiting in the wings. He's polling second right now. Trump even mentioned him as a possible VP pick, which I think is a mistake. If he's going to pick anybody for VP, I think it should be Carrie Lake. She's a pretty strong person. She doesn't back down from people, and I think that she's a little more believable, I guess.
And without getting into details, there's similar things that went on with a certain event with Carrie Lake, like a certain event with Donald Trump. I'm being vague for you to accurate purposes.
Elections are safe and effective.
Yeah,
all of our
up on the up and up, man. Except for 2016 because the Russians hacked it, right? So
yeah, exactly.
And except in 2000 when it was
2000.
Forgotten
about hanging chads. It's got memory hold, I guess.
Al Gore's still pissed that Florida's not underwater.
But yeah, that's it. I mean, it says a lot that about the MAGA base. That this is why they are the force for holding this country together. It's because of their discipline. Like every opportunity where they get into a rally, where there's excitable, where there are chances for like sabotage and mayhem, how disciplined they are. Yeah. Just like we're seeing the tapes coming out of J6, just the majority of the people there were little old grandmas and tourists who were allowed into the building.
Yeah.
And just taking pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a small minority was breaking windows.
Well, think about the Q shaman, right? He was being escorted by the police. Like they had a guy on each side. They were like, "Hey, check this out!" And hey, look at this.
They picked him out of the crowd. They wanted him to be the face of the day.
Well, now granted, the guy stands out like a sore thumb. He's got the buffalo hat. Yeah. He's got the buffalo hat and the war paint. He's got the crazy tattoos. He's wearing buckskin clothing and stuff.
That guy doesn't sneak in.
No, he doesn't sneak in. But if you're going to hold him accountable, like the police officer's the one escorting him around, and thankfully those tapes were released because that's what got him out of jail. Like that's what really kind of cleared him out was the fact that he was being escorted through there. But it's a pretty dangerous situation when people are so crazy that they stay within the velvet ropes as they're walking through. And it's every
time. It's when he was arrested the first time in New York, and again when he was arrested again, just last week. The discipline that comes from this working class putting bread on your table, it speaks for itself. MAGA is just.
I see the Q shaman's only crime was wearing a memorable hat. Yeah, exactly. I got a buddy, his name's Wild Bill, and he rides motorcycles, and he's got big Texas Longhorns on his motorcycle helmet. Yeah, he's a good dude. But
Nice.
it's that kind of stuff.
Don't take him to any protests.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, there you go. You know, it is what it is. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's you know, I always love to end it on a high note. You know, because I do think that, you know, all of us here have faith in, you know, in the MAGA movement. And yeah, if, you know, we have our criticisms of Trump, who the well-deserved criticisms, like the movement that has started under him, like who still has faith in him, because like they all understand that he's not perfect. But like, and having the discipline to support someone who does actually give them like a genuine voice and do the most important things, which are threatening to dismantle the institutions which started a coup in this country, is the most important thing to support, at all costs, because that's what's keeping the country together.
Absolutely. And I do think like if he gets through this, and he's going to have to be very strategic in how he navigates everything that's going on with him right now to get his name on the ballot and to eventually win the presidency. He's going to have to be very strategic in how he does that. If he gets there, okay, and if he gets in the White House, he's got nothing to lose at that point. He's already done one term. He's going to be a second-term president with nothing to lose. He can go out with a bang, in a peaceful bang. I mean that in a non-kinetic way. No one's applying kinetic effects. Okay. And so he has nothing to lose. So he can go and he can clean house, and hopefully that happens. Now it's going to take the right people in his cabinet. He has to hire smart and have people that he can trust that aren't going to stab him in the back. He's got to have good, solid people in his network when he gets back into the White House. Okay, that's got to happen. If that happens, all bets are off. Right now, here's the thing. You want to talk about, he's conspiring to steal elections. A lot of people don't talk about this, but John Podesta did a war game in 2020 leading up to the election, and one of the scenarios was that if Joe Biden was to lose in 2020, that John Podesta, playing the role of Joe Biden, would not concede the election. They would go to the Western Coast states, secede from the Union, and then declare Joe Biden the president. And it says that people would wait to see. Let me read this for you real quick. Let me see what.
Yeah, I've never heard this.
Okay, so this is. It says, in one scenario, John Podesta, the former chair of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and a leading figure in party circles, played former Vice President Joe Biden and refused to concede the election. The result, the threat of secession by the entire West Coast, followed by the possible intervention of the U.S. Armed Forces. But conveniently, a group of former top government officials called the Transition Integrity Project actually gained 4 possible scenarios, including one that doesn't look that different from 2016. A big popular win for Mr. Biden and a narrow electoral defeat, presumably reached after weeks of counting the votes in Pennsylvania. For their war game, they cast John Podesta, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, in the role of Mr. Biden. They expected him, when the votes came in, to concede, just as Mrs. Clinton had. But Mr. Podesta, playing Mr. Biden, shocked the organizers of the war game by saying he felt his party wouldn't let him concede, alleging voter suppression. He persuaded the governors of Wisconsin and Michigan to send pro-Biden electors to the Electoral College. And in that scenario, California, Oregon, and Washington then threatened to secede from the United States if Mr. Trump took office as planned. The House named Mr. Biden president. The Senate and the White House stuck with Mr. Trump. And at that point in the scenario, the nation stopped looking to the media and waited to see what the military would do.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
That happened.
I haven't heard that before.
Yes, that happened. So if you're going to talk about people conspiring to overthrow the government and overthrow the country via election meddling, why is John Podesta not in jail right now?
Why is he not in jail for Pizzagate, man?
Well, because pedophiles.
Like when you brought him, like he's still around. I thought he got shuttled off to a basement somewre.
I think he's like trying to. Reapply the bandages to his fingers where he cuts himself for Abramovich's spirit cooking.
Jesus, man. All right, we got to get you on another time to talk about the occult, because there's clearly stuff there.
I love that
We can
we're always
dive in.
wrapping. I love that we're always wrapping things up right as we have like the most amount of viewers that we have in the stream. Just you gotta leave them. You gotta leave them wanting more.
That's it.
You
That's
wanting
it.
more,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, we can talk about that, man. Yeah, absolutely. I got a lot I can say
Oh
about
man,
that.
we could probably go tit for tat.
Milkman, start that
look
Rumble
forward-
page. God damn it. We gotta-
I'm making the Rumble page. I'll make the Rumble page as soon as I
There
can.
you go.
I
I'm
know
looking forward
YouTube is
to
too
Ruckus
slow
Media
for
coming
us.
on again. You know, it's
I
going to be
appreciate
an
that.
exciting time.
I appreciate that.
this
Thank you
is a
guys.
great
Thank you
stream.
so much for having me. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to palate cleanser to wrap it up so that we can clip it. As we wrap up this stream, in my opinion, one of the best we've done here in our short time of running the barracks. We want to encourage y'all to go follow Ruckus Media on Twitter at Ruckus_media, like the tagline says there. Ruckus, you want to tell us what? Do you have any other channels? Like, and do you have any final words for us?
I don't have any other channels. I'm just, like I said, I'm just getting into the whole social media game. Just because I've people sit on the sidelines for so long, and it just gets to a point where you got to get off the sidelines and get into the game. Okay, you can't be lukewarm. You either got to be hot or you got to be cold. You got to be all the way out or all the way in. And I'm deciding to jump all the way in. Okay, I do plan on starting a Rumble channel, doing some more long form discussions. I do plan on doing a Ruckus podcast, probably call it like "What's the Ruckus," and eventually.
Good.
Yeah, so I do plan on expanding this out as the followership grows. Right now, I'm just trying to get some traction. You know what I mean, going on, just trying to speak the truth. A lot of my opinions, are met with some vitriol, but who isn't? Whose opinion isn't met with vitriol from one side or the other. So that's one of the things. But I'm not going to back down. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and if I say it, I mean it. Okay, you're not going to hear me give a public apology. Oh, this guy said this, and I come out and go, I know I hurt a lot of people's feelings, and I really want fuck you. Not happening. Okay, I'm not going to apologize for anything I say, because I do think about the things that I say, and if I say it, that's who I am, and I mean it. Anybody that knows me knows that. They know that I will speak my mind, and I mean what I say.
Man, every sentence, just a clippable, just a fire moment. Love it. Yeah, you're welcome on to the barracks anytime. We knew as soon as we saw your videos that we found someone who deserves to be growing real fast, because we need 100 more of you on Twitter ASAP.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, go and follow him on Twitter. Go and follow the barracks on Twitter as well at the barracks live. We also have a Discord channel. You can join us there. The link will be in the comments on YouTube. So traditionally, we like to end the stream with some closing statements from the Yankee Tanky as well. Mr. the Yankee Tanky, do you have any final moments as we reach across the aisle here to the beating heart of the militant working class of America?
Absolutely. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that, there is a counter-hegemonic right and there's a counter-hegemonic left. And these two factions need to stop looking at each other as each other's enemies and start realizing that we are allies against the globalists. We are allies against those who are trying to degrow our country, trying to make us weak men. We need strong men in these times. And the best way to be strong men is to be unified against those on the top. It's not left versus right. It is the bottom versus the top. It is the 99% versus the 1%, as they said on Occupy Wall Street. So let me just say, Ruckus Media, not just as you welcome here, I welcome all the people that are following you over there at Ruckus Media, and all the people in the barracks. I invite you guys to go and check out folks over at Ruckus Media, because we need to build a counter-hegemonic media apparatus against the establishment in today's age.
Well, folks.
Yeah, well said.
Well said.
You heard it here first, and you heard it here best. That's all we got. We're out.